Hey, everyone! I know that title probably got your attention, and I promise this isn't clickbait. There's something I really need to talk to you about today, something I've been thinking about for months now, and I finally feel ready to share it. So if you have the time, I'd really appreciate it if you could sit with me for a bit. This is going to be longer than my usual videos, but I think it's important. I think it might be something you need to hear too. Before I dive in, I want you to get comfortable. Grab some water, maybe some tea or coffee, whatever makes you feel at ease. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about the things we don't talk about enough, the struggles we hide, the masks we wear, and why we need to start being more honest with ourselves and each other. So here's the thing. For the longest time, I've been pretending. And I think a lot of you have been too. We live in this world where everyone's constantly performing, constantly curating their lives to look perfect, constantly competing in this invisible race that nobody really signed up for. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself in all of that. I started measuring my worth by numbers on a screen, by how many people liked what I did, by whether I was doing enough, achieving enough, being enough. And the truth is, I wasn't okay. I haven't been okay for a while. Not in the way that I let myself believe I was. I was functional, sure. I was getting things done, showing up, creating content, smiling for the camera. But underneath all of that, there was this constant hum of anxiety, this feeling that I was running on a treadmill that kept getting faster, and if I slowed down even for a second, everything would fall apart. Does that sound familiar to you? Because I have a feeling I'm not alone in this. I see it in the comments. I see it in the messages people send me. There's this collective exhaustion we're all experiencing, this sense that we're supposed to be thriving, but we're actually just surviving. And nobody wants to be the first one to admit it, because we're all so afraid of being seen as weak or failing, or not having it all together. But here's what I've realized. That fear, that need to appear perfect, it's literally killing us. Maybe not physically, though for some people it actually is, but it's killing our spirits, our creativity, our ability to connect with each other in meaningful ways. We've become so obsessed with the highlight reel that we've forgotten that real life happens in the messy, unfiltered moments in between. I want to tell you about something that happened to me a few months ago. I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, trying to come up with ideas for videos. And I just couldn't. My mind was completely blank. Not in a peaceful, meditative way, but in this terrifying, empty way where I felt like I had nothing left to give. I'd been pushing myself so hard for so long that I'd completely depleted myself. And the scariest part was that I didn't even recognize it was happening until I hit that wall. I remember calling a friend that night, someone I trust deeply, and just breaking down. I told them I didn't think I could do this anymore. Not just YouTube, but any of it. The constant pressure, the comparison, the feeling that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. And you know what they said to me? They said, "When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because you thought you should?" And I couldn't answer. I genuinely could not remember the last time I did something purely for myself, purely for the joy of it, without calculating how it would look or whether it would be productive or if it would help me reach some arbitrary goal I'd set. That realization hit me like a truck. How had I gotten so far away from myself? How had I let external validation become more important than my own internal peace? That conversation was a turning point for me. It forced me to start asking myself some really difficult questions. Questions like, who am I when nobody's watching? What do I actually want from my life? What brings me genuine fulfillment versus what just looks good on paper? And am I living in alignment with my values, or am I just doing what I think I'm supposed to do? These aren't easy questions to sit with. In fact, they're incredibly uncomfortable, because when you start digging into them, you realize how much of your life might be built on foundations that aren't actually yours. Maybe you're pursuing a career because it's what your parents wanted. Maybe you're in a relationship because you're afraid of being alone. Maybe you're living in a city you hate because you think that's where you need to be to succeed. Maybe you're creating content you don't even care about because the algorithm rewards it. And listen, I'm not here to tell you that you need to blow up your entire life. That's not what this is about. But I do think we need to start paying attention to the disconnect between who we are and who we're pretending to be. Because that disconnect, that gap between our authentic selves and our performed selves, that's where the suffering lives. That's where the anxiety and depression and burnout come from. It's exhausting to be someone you're not, day after day after day. So I made a decision. I decided that I was going to start being more honest. Not just with you all, but with myself. I was going to stop chasing things that didn't actually matter to me. I was going to stop comparing my journey to everyone else's. I was going to stop measuring my worth by metrics that have nothing to do with my actual happiness or fulfillment. And most importantly, I was going to start reconnecting with the parts of myself I'd abandoned in the pursuit of success. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't some magical solution where everything suddenly became perfect. Change doesn't work like that. It's messy and non-linear, and there are days where I still fall back into old patterns. There are still moments where I catch myself scrolling through social media, feeling that familiar pang of inadequacy when I see someone else doing something I think I should be doing. The difference is that now I notice it. I catch myself, and I make a different choice. One of the first things I did was take a real break. Not a weekend off where I'm still checking my phone every 5 minutes, but an actual, intentional break from content creation, from social media, from all the noise. And it was terrifying at first. I kept having these intrusive thoughts about how I was going to lose relevance, how people would forget about me, how the algorithm would punish me when I came back. But I pushed through that fear because I knew I needed space to remember who I was outside of all of this. During that break, I did a lot of things I hadn't done in years. I read books just for pleasure, not for self-improvement or because I thought I should. I went on long walks without listening to podcasts, just being present with my thoughts and the world around me. I cooked elaborate meals that took hours, for no reason other than I enjoyed the process. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I sat with my feelings instead of immediately trying to fix them or distract myself from them. And something interesting started to happen. I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of myself that exists for cameras or content, but the real me. The person who has weird interests and makes bad jokes and sometimes just wants to lie on the floor and stare at the ceiling. The person who doesn't have all the answers and is still figuring things out and makes mistakes. The person who is, ultimately, just a human being trying to navigate this complicated world the best they can. When I finally came back to creating content, something had shifted. I no longer felt like I was performing a role. I felt like I was just sharing my thoughts and experiences in a genuine way, without the weight of expectation or the need for validation. And honestly, that's made all the difference. It's like I finally gave myself permission to be imperfect, and in doing so, I freed myself from this prison I didn't even realize I was in. But here's where this gets really important, and why I wanted to talk to you about all of this. Because I absolutely know, that some of you are going through the same thing. Maybe not in the exact same way, but in your own version of it. Maybe you're in a job that's draining your soul, but you're too afraid to leave. Maybe you're in a relationship that stopped working a long time ago, but you don't know how to have that conversation. Maybe you're struggling with your mental health, but you're trying to white-knuckle your way through it, because asking for help feels like admitting defeat. Maybe you're just tired. Tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of trying to live up to expectations that were never yours to begin with. And I want you to know that it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to admit that you're struggling. It's okay to take a step back and reassess what you actually want from your life. It's okay to change your mind about the path you thought you were supposed to be on. It's okay to prioritize your well-being over your productivity. It's okay to be a work in progress. It's okay to be human. I think one of the most damaging lies we've been sold is that we should have it all figured out. That by a certain age, we should have achieved certain milestones, hit certain markers of success, become certain versions of ourselves. But life doesn't work that way. Growth isn't linear. Healing isn't linear. Success, whatever that even means, isn't linear. We're all just making it up as we go along, trying to do our best with the information and resources we have in any given moment. And yet, we hold ourselves to these impossible standards. We look at other people's curated versions of their lives and compare them to the full, messy reality of our own. We forget that we're only seeing the highlight reel, the polished final product, not the hundreds of hours of struggle and doubt and failure that went into it. We forget that everyone, and I mean everyone, is fighting battles we know nothing about. We forget that the people who seem to have it all together are probably just really good at pretending. So what do we do about this? How do we break free from these patterns that keep us stuck? Well, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you what's been helping me. And maybe some of this will resonate with you too. First, I started practicing radical honesty with myself. And when I say radical, I mean really getting real about what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm avoiding. It's so easy to lie to ourselves, to minimize our struggles, to tell ourselves we're fine when we're not. But healing starts with acknowledging the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it means admitting we've been making choices that aren't serving us. Even when it means confronting parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. I started journaling regularly, just stream of consciousness stuff where I let myself write whatever comes up without judgment or censorship. And I was honestly shocked by what came out. All these feelings and fears and resentments I'd been pushing down for years. All these dreams and desires I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. All these ways I'd been betraying myself in small, almost imperceptible ways that had added up over time. Getting all of that out on paper, making it visible and tangible, that was the first step in actually dealing with it. Second, I started setting boundaries. Real boundaries, not the kind I said I had, but then immediately violated when someone pushed back. This was hard, really hard, because I'm someone who wants to be liked, who wants to help, who hates disappointing people. But I realized that saying yes to everything was actually a form of self-abandonment. Every time I said yes when I meant no, I was telling myself that other people's needs and wants were more important than my own. And that's just not sustainable. Learning to say no, to protect my time and energy, to prioritize my own needs, it felt selfish at first. I kept waiting for people to get angry or reject me. And sure, some people didn't like it. Some people who were used to me being available all the time, who benefited from my lack of boundaries, they pushed back. But the people who really mattered, the people who actually cared about me, they respected it. They understood. And honestly, setting those boundaries improved my relationships because I was showing up as a more authentic, less resentful version of myself. Third, I started being more intentional about how I spend my time and energy. I did an audit of my life, looking at where my time was actually going versus where I wanted it to go. And the discrepancy was staggering. I was spending hours every day on things that didn't matter to me, that didn't bring me joy or fulfillment, that were just habits or obligations I'd accumulated over time. So I started cutting things out. I unsubscribed from newsletters I never read. I left group chats that were just sources of stress. I stopped following accounts that made me feel bad about myself. I said no to commitments that didn't align with my values or goals. And in the space that created, I started adding back in things that actually mattered. I started spending more time in nature. I picked up old hobbies I'd abandoned. I invested more deeply in relationships that nourished me. I created space for rest, for boredom, for just being instead of constantly doing. And slowly, gradually, I started to feel more like myself than I had in years. Fourth, I worked on separating my identity from my achievements. This is something I'm still working on, to be honest, because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture. We're taught from a young age that we are what we do, that our value comes from our accomplishments, that we need to constantly be striving and achieving and proving ourselves. But that's a trap. Because if your worth is tied to your achievements, then you're always one failure away from feeling worthless. You're always in this precarious position where your sense of self is dependent on external circumstances you can't fully control. I've been trying to cultivate a sense of inherent worth, the understanding that I have value simply because I exist, not because of anything I've done or created or accomplished. That my worth as a human being is not up for debate or negotiation. That I don't have to earn my right to take up space, or to have needs, or to be treated with respect and dignity. This is revolutionary, honestly. It's changed the way I show up in the world, the way I make decisions, the way I relate to myself and others. Fifth, I started taking my mental health seriously. I found a therapist I clicked with, and I've been doing the work. Real work, not just surface-level stuff. Digging into patterns from my childhood, examining my beliefs and assumptions, learning new ways of relating to my thoughts and emotions. It's not always comfortable. In fact, it's often deeply uncomfortable. But it's necessary. Because we all carry wounds, we all have baggage, we all have coping mechanisms that might have served us at one point but are now holding us back. And I want to normalize this. Going to therapy doesn't mean you're broken or weak. It means you're committed to your own growth and healing. It means you're willing to invest in yourself, to do the hard work of becoming more integrated and whole. I wish mental health care was more accessible for everyone, because I truly believe that therapy should be as routine as going to the doctor for a physical. Our mental and emotional well-being is just as important as our physical health, maybe even more so. Sixth, I started practicing self-compassion. This might sound simple, but it's actually one of the hardest things I've had to learn. I've spent most of my life being incredibly harsh with myself, criticizing every mistake, beating myself up over every perceived failure, holding myself to standards I would never dream of holding anyone else to. And that inner critic, that voice that tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, talented enough, whatever enough, it's exhausting. It's corrosive. It eats away at your confidence and your joy and your ability to take risks or try new things. So I've been working on talking to myself the way I would talk to a good friend. With kindness, with understanding, with the recognition that I'm doing my best and that making mistakes is part of being human. When something doesn't go the way I hoped, instead of immediately jumping to self-criticism, I try to pause and ask myself what I need in that moment. Maybe it's reassurance. Maybe it's to learn from what happened. Maybe it's just to acknowledge that it's okay to feel disappointed. This shift in how I relate to myself has been profound. It's created this sense of safety and security within myself that I've never had before. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually start? How do I make these changes when I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is? And I get it. I really do. When you're in survival mode, the idea of doing deep inner work or making big life changes can feel overwhelming, maybe even impossible. So I want to offer you this. Start small. Start with one tiny thing you can do today that's in service of your well-being, your authenticity, your truth. Maybe it's taking 5 minutes to sit quietly and check in with yourself, asking how you really feel. Maybe it's saying no to one thing you don't actually want to do. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you trust and admitting you're struggling. Maybe it's deleting an app that's been stealing your peace. Maybe it's going to bed an hour earlier. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to not be productive for one evening. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be big or dramatic. It just has to be real. Because here's the thing about change. It happens in the small, consistent choices we make every day. It's not about some grand gesture or complete life overhaul, though sometimes those are necessary too. It's about the tiny moments where you choose yourself, where you honor your needs, where you act in alignment with your values even when it's hard or inconvenient. Those moments add up. They compound. And over time, they create a life that actually feels like yours. I also want to talk about the role of community in all of this. Because while individual healing and growth is important, we can't do it alone. We're social creatures. We need connection. We need to feel seen and heard and understood. We need to know that we're not the only ones going through whatever we're going through. And that's part of why I wanted to make this video, why I wanted to be vulnerable and honest with you all. Because maybe, just maybe, my story will help you feel less alone in yours. I've been really intentional about surrounding myself with people who support my growth, who call me out when I'm not being true to myself, who celebrate my wins and hold space for my struggles. And I've had to let go of some relationships that were no longer serving me, which was painful but necessary. Not everyone is meant to be in your life forever, and that's okay. Some people are there for a season, and when that season ends, holding on too tightly just creates suffering for everyone involved. If you're feeling isolated or like you don't have a supportive community, I want to encourage you to start building one. It might mean joining a group or class around something you're interested in. It might mean being more vulnerable with the people already in your life. It might mean seeking out online communities where you can connect with people who share your experiences or values. It might mean working with a therapist or coach who can provide professional support. Whatever it looks like for you, prioritize connection. We're not meant to do this alone. I also want to address something that I think is really important, which is the difference between self-care and self-indulgence. Because I see a lot of people using self-care as an excuse to avoid doing hard things or to stay comfortable in situations that aren't serving them. Real self-care isn't just about bubble baths and face masks, though those things are nice. Real self-care is doing the things that are genuinely good for you, even when they're uncomfortable in the moment. It's having the hard conversation. It's setting the boundary. It's going to therapy. It's ending the relationship that's been over for a while. It's facing your fears instead of avoiding them. It's doing your taxes and going to the dentist and dealing with the thing you've been procrastinating on. Self-care is about taking responsibility for your well-being in a holistic way. It's about making choices that your future self will thank you for. And yes, sometimes that includes rest and relaxation and pleasure. But it also includes the harder stuff, the stuff that requires courage and effort and a willingness to be uncomfortable in service of your long-term growth and happiness. Another thing I've been thinking a lot about is the concept of enough. We live in a culture that's constantly telling us we need more. More money, more success, more followers, more stuff, more experiences, more everything. And we internalize that message, believing that we'll finally be happy or fulfilled or worthy when we reach some arbitrary milestone. But then we reach it, and instead of satisfaction, we just move the goalpost further away. We tell ourselves, okay, just a little more, and then I'll be content. But that day never comes because there will always be more to want, more to achieve, more to acquire. So I've been trying to cultivate a sense of enoughness. To recognize when I have what I need, when I've done what I can, when I am who I am, and to let that be okay. To find contentment in the present moment instead of always looking ahead to some imagined future where everything will magically be better. This doesn't mean giving up on goals or ambitions or dreams. It just means finding a balance between striving and accepting, between wanting to grow and being okay with where you are right now. This ties into gratitude, which I know can sound cliché, but hear me out. I started keeping a gratitude practice, not in a toxic positivity way where I ignore real problems, but in a way that helps me remember what's actually good in my life. Because it's so easy to fixate on what's wrong, what's missing, what's not working. Our brains are literally wired to focus on threats and problems. It's a survival mechanism. But that means we have to be intentional about noticing the good stuff, the small moments of joy and beauty and connection that happen every day if we're paying attention. Every evening, I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Some days it's big things, but most days it's small stuff. The way the light looked coming through the window, a good conversation with a friend, a meal I really enjoyed, my bed being comfortable. These tiny moments of appreciation, they add up. They shift my perspective. They remind me that even on hard days, even when things feel overwhelming, there's still good to be found. I want to circle back to something I mentioned earlier about authenticity, because I think it's at the heart of everything I've been talking about. Being authentic doesn't mean oversharing every thought and feeling you have. It doesn't mean having no filter or being brutally honest in ways that are hurtful to others. It means knowing who you are, what you value, what matters to you, and letting that guide your choices and actions. It means not contorting yourself to fit into boxes that were never meant for you. It means having the courage to be seen as you truly are, even when it's scary, even when you risk rejection or judgment. And I'm not going to lie, being authentic is risky. When you stop performing, when you stop trying to be who you think others want you to be, some people won't like it. Some people will be uncomfortable with your honesty, with your boundaries, with your refusal to play along with dynamics that aren't healthy. But here's what I've learned. The people who matter, the people who are truly meant to be in your life, they'll appreciate your authenticity. They'll meet you there. And the people who don't, well, they're not your people, and that's okay. There's this quote that I think about a lot. Be yourself, everyone else is already taken. It's simple but profound. You are the only person who can be you. You have a unique combination of experiences, perspectives, talents, and quirks that no one else has. And the world needs that. The world needs your authentic contribution, whatever that looks like for you. When you spend your energy trying to be someone else, trying to fit some mold of who you think you should be, you're depriving the world of your unique gifts. You're also depriving yourself of the joy and freedom that comes from living in alignment with your truth. I've also been thinking about legacy, about what I want to leave behind. And I've realized that it's not about achieving some massive level of fame or success, or leaving my mark on the world in some grand way. It's much simpler than that. I want to be remembered as someone who was kind, who was real, who made people feel seen and less alone. I want to look back on my life and feel like I lived it on my own terms, that I made choices based on what felt right to me, not what I thought I was supposed to do. I want to have deep, meaningful relationships. I want to have grown and evolved and become more of who I'm meant to be. That's the legacy that matters to me. What's your legacy? What do you want your life to be about? Not in some abstract, far-off future sense, but right now, today. Because your life is happening now. This moment, right here, this is it. This is the only moment you're guaranteed. And I think we forget that. We postpone our happiness, our authenticity, our dreams, thinking we'll get to them later, when circumstances are better, when we have more time or money or confidence. But later isn't guaranteed. All we have is now. That might sound morbid, but I actually find it liberating. It gives me permission to stop waiting and start living, to stop preparing for my life to begin and recognize that it's already happening, to make choices based on what matters to me now, not on some imagined future version of myself, to take risks, to be brave, to go after what I want even if I'm scared, even if I might fail. Speaking of failure, I want to talk about that for a minute. We're so afraid of failing, of making mistakes, of not being perfect. But failure is how we learn. It's how we grow. Every successful person you admire has failed, probably many times. The difference is that they didn't let those failures define them or stop them. They learned from them, adjusted their approach, and kept going. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the path to success. I've failed at so many things. Relationships that didn't work out. Projects that flopped. Goals I didn't reach. Times I made the wrong choice, or said the wrong thing, or hurt someone I cared about. And yes, those failures hurt. They were humbling and embarrassing, and sometimes devastating in the moment. But every single one of them taught me something. About myself, about what I want, about what I'm capable of, about how to do better next time. Without those failures, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have the wisdom or resilience or perspective I've gained. So I want to encourage you to reframe how you think about failure. Instead of seeing it as a reflection of your worth or capability, see it as data. See it as feedback. See it as proof that you're trying, that you're pushing yourself, that you're willing to risk looking foolish or falling short in pursuit of something meaningful. Some of the most important lessons I've learned came from my biggest failures. And I'd rather fail at things that matter to me than succeed at things that don't. This brings me to another important point, the difference between fear and intuition. Because sometimes we avoid doing things because we're scared, and sometimes we avoid doing things because it genuinely isn't right for us. Learning to distinguish between those two things is crucial. Fear often sounds like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good enough? It's future-focused, catastrophic, and rooted in insecurity. Intuition, on the other hand, is quieter, more grounded. It sounds like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't aligned with who I am or what I want. I've learned to sit with uncomfortable feelings before making decisions, to give myself space to figure out what I'm actually feeling and why. Am I avoiding this because I'm scared of the unknown, or because it's genuinely not the right path for me? Sometimes I need to push through the fear and do the thing anyway. Sometimes I need to listen to my intuition and change direction. The key is developing enough self-awareness to know the difference. Let me tell you about a time I had to make a really hard decision. I was offered an opportunity that looked amazing on paper. It was with a big company. It would have meant more exposure, more money, more of what I thought I wanted. But something felt off about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on what, but there was this nagging feeling that it wasn't right. And I was so torn because logically, it made sense to say yes. Everyone around me thought I should say yes. But my gut was saying no. I sat with that discomfort for weeks, really examining what I was feeling. And I realized that saying yes would have meant compromising on some of my core values. It would have required me to create content I didn't believe in, to present myself in ways that weren't authentic, to prioritize profit over purpose. And once I recognized that, the decision became clear. I said no. It was scary, and part of me wondered if I was making a huge mistake. But looking back now, it was absolutely the right call. It freed me up to pursue opportunities that were actually aligned with who I am and what I care about. That's the power of trusting yourself, of listening to your inner wisdom even when it doesn't make logical sense, even when it goes against what others think you should do. You know yourself better than anyone else does. You know what you need, what you want, what feels right for you. And yes, it's important to seek advice and perspective from people you trust. But ultimately, you have to make your own choices and live with the consequences of those choices. So you might as well make choices you can stand behind, choices that reflect who you really are. I want to talk about time for a minute, because I think our relationship with time is really messed up. We treat time like it's this infinite resource, like we have all the time in the world to do the things we want to do, to become who we want to become, to say the things we need to say. But we don't. Time is the one thing we can never get more of. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I think if we really, truly internalized that, we would live very differently. We would stop wasting time on things that don't matter. We would stop spending time with people who drain us or in situations that make us miserable just because we think we should. We would stop putting off our dreams and our happiness and our authentic lives until some imaginary future date when conditions are perfect. We would be more present, more intentional, more grateful for the time we have. I'm not saying this to be depressing or to create anxiety. I'm saying it because I want you to wake up. I want you to stop sleepwalking through your life. I want you to recognize that your time here is precious and limited, and you get to choose how you spend it. Every day, every hour, every moment is a choice. Are you choosing in service of your authentic self and what truly matters to you, or are you choosing based on fear, obligation, and what others expect? This is something I think about every day now. When I'm making decisions about how to spend my time, I try to ask myself, Will this matter in a year? In 5 years? Will I be glad I spent my time this way? Is this aligned with my values and what I want my life to be about? And if the answer is no, I try to find the courage to make a different choice. Of course, we all have responsibilities and obligations. I'm not suggesting you can just opt out of everything that's difficult or unpleasant. But I think a lot of what we consider obligations are actually just habits or expectations that we could challenge if we were willing to. Maybe you don't have to attend every social event you're invited to. Maybe you don't have to maintain relationships that feel draining just because you've known someone for a long time. Maybe you don't have to keep doing that volunteer thing you used to enjoy but now resent. Maybe you don't have to live your life according to someone else's blueprint. You have more freedom than you think you do. Yes, there are real constraints and responsibilities. But within those, there's still a lot of room for choice. And exercising that choice, taking ownership of your life and how you spend your time, that's empowering. That's what it means to live intentionally. I also want to address social media specifically, because I think it's had such a profound impact on all of our lives, and not always in positive ways. Don't get me wrong, there are wonderful things about social media. It allows us to connect with people across the globe, to share ideas and art and stories, to build communities around shared interests. But it's also created this culture of comparison and performance that's really toxic. We're constantly bombarded with images of other people's perfect lives, their achievements, their happiness, their bodies, their relationships, their everything. And even though we know logically that what we're seeing is curated and filtered and often completely fabricated, it still affects us. We still measure ourselves against these impossible standards. We still feel like we're not doing enough, being enough, having enough. And then there's the addiction factor. These platforms are literally designed to keep us hooked, to keep us scrolling, to hijack our attention and our dopamine systems. We check our phones compulsively, mindlessly, stealing moments of presence from our real lives to engage with this digital world that's ultimately hollow. We interrupt conversations, we miss sunsets, we fail to be fully present with the people we love because we're so distracted by our screens. I've had to set really strict boundaries around my social media use because I recognize how destructive it can be for me. I have set times when I check it, and I try to be very intentional about why I'm on there and what I'm consuming. I unfollow accounts that make me feel bad about myself. I limit my time and use apps that track my usage and lock me out after a certain amount. And I regularly take breaks, sometimes for days or weeks at a time, to reset my relationship with it. I'd encourage you to examine your own relationship with social media. Is it adding value to your life, or is it taking more than it gives? How do you feel after spending time on it? Are you using it intentionally, or is it using you? What would change if you stepped back from it, even temporarily? These are questions worth asking, because the time and attention we give to these platforms is time and attention we're not giving to everything else. Let me bring this back to where I started, to this idea that I need to tell you something important. Because here it is, the heart of what I want to say. You matter. Your life matters. Your happiness matters. Your authenticity matters. You are worthy of love and respect and dignity just as you are, right now, not when you achieve something or fix something or become something different. You are enough. And I know that might be hard to believe, especially if you've spent years being told or feeling like you're not enough. But it's true. You are a valuable, important, irreplaceable human being. And you deserve to live a life that feels true to you, that brings you joy and meaning and fulfillment. You deserve to be seen and heard and understood. You deserve to take up space and have needs and pursue your dreams. You deserve all of that and more. But here's the thing, no one can give that to you. No amount of external validation or achievement or success will ever fill the void if you don't believe in your own worth. That work, that fundamental acceptance of yourself, that has to come from within. And it's some of the hardest work you'll ever do, but it's also the most important. So I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to start showing up more authentically in your life. To stop hiding, stop performing, stop pretending. To start asking yourself what you really want, what really matters to you, who you really are. To start making choices that honor your truth, even when it's scary, even when people don't understand. To start treating yourself with the same compassion and kindness you'd offer to someone you love. I want to challenge you to examine the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what's possible for you. Because so many of us are living inside of limiting beliefs that aren't even ours. We absorb them from our families, our cultures, our experiences, and we've been carrying them around like they're truth when they're actually just stories. And stories can be rewritten. What if you're capable of more than you think? What if you're worthy of more than you've been settling for? What if the life you dream about is actually possible if you're willing to take steps toward it? What if you stopped waiting for permission and just gave it to yourself? What would change? I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm not saying you just snap your fingers and everything falls into place. Change is hard. Growth is hard. Facing yourself is hard. But you know what's also hard? Staying stuck. Living inauthentically. Waking up years from now with regrets about the life you didn't live, the person you didn't become, the risks you didn't take. That's hard too. So you get to choose your hard. I'm choosing the hard of growth, of authenticity, of vulnerability. I'm choosing to show up as I am, to do the inner work, to face my fears and insecurities and shadows. I'm choosing to build a life that reflects my values and brings me genuine fulfillment, even if it looks different from what I thought it would look like. I'm choosing to be honest, to be real, to stop performing. And it's not always comfortable, but it's so much better than the alternative. And I hope, if you're resonating with any of this, that you'll make that choice too. That you'll choose yourself. That you'll choose authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, growth over stagnation. That you'll be brave enough to look at your life honestly and make changes where changes need to be made. That you'll be compassionate enough with yourself to recognize that you're doing your best, and that's enough. We're all just humans trying to figure this out. None of us have all the answers. We're all making mistakes, learning lessons, evolving as we go. And that's okay. That's the whole point. Life isn't about reaching some final destination of perfection. It's about the journey, the process, the continuous unfolding of who we are and who we're becoming. So be gentle with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Forgive yourself when you fall back into old patterns, because you will. We all do. Change isn't linear. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't linear. There will be setbacks and obstacles and moments where you feel like you're back at square one. But you're not. Every step, even the backwards ones, is part of the journey. And please reach out if you need help. Talk to someone you trust. Find a therapist. Join a support group. Connect with communities that understand what you're going through. Don't try to do this alone. We need each other. We're meant to support and uplift and hold space for one another. There's no shame in asking for help. In fact, it takes tremendous strength and courage. I want to close by saying thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for letting me be vulnerable and real with you. This video has been incredibly cathartic for me to make, and I hope it's been valuable for you in some way. I hope it's made you feel less alone. I hope it's given you permission to be more honest with yourself. I hope it's inspired you to make changes that will lead to a more authentic, fulfilling life. Remember, you are not your achievements. You are not your productivity. You are not your bank account or your follower count or your relationship status or any external marker of worth. You are a complex, multifaceted, ever-evolving human being with inherent value. You are worthy of love and belonging just as you are. You are enough, right now, in this moment. And you always have been. So go forward from here with a little more courage, a little more compassion, a little more honesty. Choose yourself. Honor yourself. Be yourself. Because the world needs you, the real you, not some polished, perfect version that doesn't actually exist. Your authenticity is your superpower. Your vulnerability is your strength. Your humanity is your gift. I believe in you. I'm rooting for you. And I'm right there with you, doing this messy, beautiful work of becoming. We're in this together. Thank you for being here.